I've learned anything from playing the Resident Evil games, it's that they feature some of the toughest and most terrifying bosses to date. Yeah, Silent Hill, blah blah. But anyway, in this video, I'm going down the list of the top 13 toughest Resident Evil bosses. I would have said top 10, but I just thought of 3 more to add to the list. So, here we go. In at number 13, we have the Queen Leech, aka James Marcus, from Resident Evil 0. To call him a worthy adversary would be a stretch, but the Queen Leech does have some decent attacks. He can pick you up and slam you, and also has long tendrils that he can whip you with. As long as you maintain a safe distance and manage your ammo, though, you should be okay. And not to mention, you have Billy Cohen helping you out with the fight. You battle the Leech a couple times throughout the game, with the final battle being on a lift that takes you up out of the Umbrella Labs. This fight is about the same as the previous one, just keep shooting the hell out of him and you're good. Then, after a while, Billy delivers the final blow and the Leech burns up in an explosion. Then, number 12 brings us Evelyn. Yes, the little girl turned old lady from Resident Evil 7. You encounter her quite a few times in the early parts of the game as an old woman who just creeps around, and then again as a little girl later on. You don't find out that they're one and the same until way later. The fight isn't really that challenging, honestly. You just have to fight your way through her mental force field and inject her with a serum. And then she turns into like a giant tentacle monster and you just shoot her repeatedly in the face until a cutscene happens. Really, it's not that big of a challenge. In at number 11 is Lisa Trevor. Oh god, this one's rough. Lisa Trevor is one of Umbrella's first human test subjects. She's the daughter of the architect that built the mansion, who they kidnapped and tested on for years. And then they imprisoned her in the catacombs under the mansion. You encounter her a couple times, once in a log cabin outside. Her hands are bound, but if she hits you, it deals a lot of damage. And she can also whip you with, guess what? Tentacles. They all have them. With that being said, it's best just to run. The second encounter with Lisa is when you gain access to the catacombs and find her mother's tomb. I will say shooting Lisa is pointless though because she's basically invincible. She still believes her mother's alive after all this time, and what you have to do in the fight is dodge her attacks while dropping these weights, which lifts up the lid on the coffin. Lisa then sees that her mother's dead, and she jumps into an abyss. Is she dead? We don't know. The number 10 spot is going to Mr. X from Resident Evil 2 Remake. As much as I love him as a boss character, with his Michael Myers-like stalking, his final fight was just too easy. So you're on a lift heading out of the nest and must battle a mutated Mr. X as he charges you and swipes at you with a huge claw. As long as you're good at dodging though, and have plenty of ammo, it should be a piece of cake. He'll do this thing where he stands still and powers up, which is a signal that he's about to pounce on you, and you just gotta shoot him in the heart to stop it. Then, after enough damage, Ada drops down a rocket launcher, and with one shot, you blast him in half. Game over. Making the number 9 seed on the list, Lady Demetrius is just as intimidating as Mr. X, using the same gameplay engine. In Resident Evil Village, she operates the same way. However, you can't inflict any damage on her unless the game wants you to, i.e. during certain parts of the game. If she's just stalking you around the house and you shoot her, you're just wasting your time and your ammo. But at the end of her segment, she mutates into a giant dragon-type situation and flies all around you, and you can shoot her with any long-range weapon, and when she lands, you can even hit her with a pipe bomb or a grenade. Personally, I prefer the Magnum, if you have it. And then, after that, she bleeds out and falls to her death, and turns into a crystal. Alexandra Ashford is number 8 on the list. She bonded with the T. Veronica virus in such a way that she turns into a giant plant lady. She can whip you with, guess what, tentacles, and spit out a poisonous mist. Granted, during the entire fight, she's fixated to the ground, but don't get too cocky. She can fuck you up. After enough damage, she breaks free of her base and starts flying around like a fucking giant wasp. And then, a special rail cannon gun becomes available to you to put her in her place. Nosferatu is Alexia's father, Alexandra Ashford, who was injected with the Veronica virus as well and locked deep within the facility. However, eventually he gets out and earned the number 7 spot on the list. Fighting in a frozen tundra must suck. Fighting a partially bound tentacle monster sucks even worse though. Nosferatu can't use his hands, but he sure can whip you with his tentacle. I swear, that's like all these guys go for. Like, everybody has tentacles. Seriously. After nearly knocking Steve to his death, you find and use a long-range rifle to blast him in the exposed heart. You have to keep moving though, because he emits a poisonous gas that will hurt you if you get near it. Eventually though, he just gives up. At number 6, we have Wesker, who doesn't seem like a big deal at all. Well, until he decided to punch a tank full of Ouroboros and become an even bigger asshole in Resident Evil 5. Not only are you fighting him in a volcano, but you have to jump around and evade him. Wesker uses the Ouroboros as a giant tentacle and has shards of metal wrapped within them. And he can whip you with it, so yeah. You do have the ability to dodge, but you better be good at hitting those buttons. Eventually, during the fight, Shiva joins in and helps you out once enough damage is delivered. And then, you enter a cutscene where you make Wesker eat a rocket, so that's a thing. From the classic RE1, we have the Tyrant, coming in at number 5. The ultimate life form and Umbrella's crown jewel, the Tyrant gets released from containment by Wesker as he's trying to kill Chris and Jill in the lab beneath the mansion. The Tyrant is super fast. He can lunge at you and swipe at you with his giant claw, much like the one from RE2. However, this one's a lot lankier and a lot faster. You just have to run around constantly and dodge his attack, which is basically the same thing over and over again. But in between, you have to squeeze some gunfire in when you can. Eventually, after enough damage, Brad will drop down a rocket launcher from the helicopter, and you can use it to blast him into oblivion. Honestly, this is shot for shot the Mr. X fight from RE2. Literally. Coming in at number 4 is William Birkin. After being found out to be selling the G-Virus on the black market, Umbrella had the virus taken from Birkin, resulting in him getting gunned down. In his final moments, Birkin injected the G-Virus into himself, which mutated him horribly. So you fight Birkin periodically throughout the game, as his mutation gets worse. First in his G1 form, where he just grabs you and hits you with a pipe. At this point, he'll have a giant eyeball on one shoulder, and you can use that as a weak spot to slow him down. Then, in his G2 form, he's a bit more agile and can run at you, and swipe with a giant claw hand. In the alleged final fight, Birkin is a full-on beast, and is basically hopping around everywhere. You have to constantly dodge his lunging attack, and focus your gunfire on his multiple eyeballs. Oh, but no, you're still not done. Depending on whether or not you play as Leon or Claire in Resident Evil 2, you'll have to fight him yet again. This time as a blob of flesh and bone. He's even more spastic with his lunges this time, so just blast him in the chest where his eyeballs move to. Technically this is a Claire fight, and she'll have a chain gun, so just blast him with that. There, he's dead. Oh no, I'm just kidding. Then, in a truly final fight, you just have to fight a wall of flesh. A few rockets should do the trick, just don't let him get too close to you. And yeah, Birkin does have the lengthiest amount of fights, aside from Nemesis. In the number 3 spot is Mother Miranda from Resident Evil Village. Trying to take Ethan's daughter away, she mutates with the mutamycete into a, well, I don't know exactly, a thing. You stock up pretty well right before the fight, but somehow she makes you use pretty much all of your ammo right away. Miranda really doesn't stay grounded at all during the fight, and she'll levitate and rain down some kind of fire on you, and occasionally lunge at you, which almost drains all of your health every time. It's pretty annoying. At some point, it goes pitch black and she tries to sneak attack you, so you just have to have a weapon ready to shoot her in the face. As per usual, with enough damage, you enter a cutscene where you just shoot her a few times at close range to finish her off. Jack Baker is our number 2. Much like Lady Demetrius and Mr. X, Jack follows you around the whole time during Resident Evil 7. At first, he's just a normal-looking guy, but after the first battle, he's a bit more. So you meet a cop and you're trying to escape from this crazy-ass house you've been trapped in when Jack shows up and kills the cop. Then you have to run around the garage and avoid his attacks. He pretty much just punches you and shit. After a while, you find car keys and can ram him with a car. A bit later on, you fight Jack in the basement with a chainsaw, and you can kick these sandbags into him as a distraction, and then eventually saw him in half. Oh, that's still not enough? Well, then he mutates into a giant whatever the hell this thing is, and you have to run around a boathouse. He can hit you with these appendages, not tentacles, and you have to shoot these pustules on his body. After that, a cutscene happens where you inject him with a cure, seemingly killing him. Haha, not even close. In the DLC, End of Zoe, you play as Jack's brother, who just loves to eat bugs and punch shit. Then you encounter the Swamp Man, which is, yep, Jack. The final fight between you and him is pretty hard because he grabs you and can hit you with elongated limbs. He pretty much throws you around the whole time. But also, when he's down, you can pick him up and powerbomb him, and even hit him with this special gauntlet that you find that knocks him the fuck out. And finally, at the number 1 spot is, yep, Nemesis. In my opinion, he's the toughest and most terrifying. Not only does he share the stalking ability with Mr. X, Jack, and Demetrius, but Nemesis can run fast as shit and hit you with tentacles. Not only that, but he seemingly drops out of the sky when you least expect it. You can get him down, but not for long. And like Mr. X, you can only damage him at certain points in the game, whenever it wants you to. In the first fight, you have to shoot a tank on his back, engulfing him in flames. It's not that easy. He's constantly pursuing you. You can shoot this battery that stuns him, but you gotta act quick. And then you fight him in a second stage where he's just running around like a cheetah. When he finally jumps down, the best plan of action is to hit him with grenade rounds, and eventually, a cutscene will happen. In the final fight, you face off against him in some kind of arena where you do more dodging. This time, though, he's got a long tentacle attack that sweeps you off your feet. Oh yeah, and zombies are all over the place. With enough damage, Carlos comes in and drowns him in acid. In the final act of the game, you face another giant wall of flesh. You have to push in these 3 batteries along the wall for a rail cannon to activate that overheats way too easily. But at the same time, you have to dodge all of his attacks, which he's just slamming his tentacles all over the ground. When the batteries are finally in place, you can pick up the cannon and blast him. But of course, it resets after each hit, and you have to do it 3 times to end him for good. Well guys, that was my lengthy list of toughest Resident Evil bosses. Yeah, it went on a bit longer than I anticipated, but what can you do? Who's your favorite Resident Evil boss? What's your toughest boss fight in any Resident Evil game? Alright guys, well I'll see you on the next one.